Hey there, my name is Jason Knox, and I'm hanging out in my studio at about 11 o'clock at night. A couple days ago, I finished mixing a song that I recorded with a friend of mine, Casey Virak, who's a great songwriter, singer, plays in a band called Porcupine. And we have this sort of ongoing songwriting and recording project called Dolly Rocker. It's mostly his songs, and well, they're all his songs, and then we just kind of polish them up together, and then we bring in musician friends of ours, and sort of they play on stuff, and we just sort of piece it all together. And I just figured I'd walk through one of the songs just to kind of show you a little bit of our process. I'm always curious to see how other people work, and there might be three of you out there who would be curious to see how we put this song together, so I figured I'd do it just to kind of document the process. It's sort of this particular song that I'll show you is sort of indicative of how we've been approaching a number of the songs so far and how we hope to approach more in the future. So, anywho, I'm gonna just show you a little clip of the song real quick. It's out here on SoundCloud. It's called Compass, and it's under the band name is called Dolly Rocker. So I'll just kick it over to the beginning of the song.
Am I in a dream? Is all what it seems, or a tragedy? Swim to the shore.
So I'll stop it there. I'm sure we're going to hear plenty more of that as we talk through this. And you can always go to this link if you want to hear the whole whole song. I'll just throw the link into the description of this video. So, anywho, so let's close this for now and get back to the Logic project. So I record in Logic Pro X. Love it. It does a lot of great things. And again, the basic setup for this has been Casey writes the songs, or comes in with a song idea, and then we sort of like polish it together and sort of, piece the whole thing together. And I guess what I'll demonstrate that sort of by playing one of the early demos of this song, a couple things just to kind of show you the very bare bones of how it starts out. So this song started like 3 years ago. That's when he first came to me and asked me if I wanted to do some acoustic songs, and just kind of, and basically by acoustic songs we meant like they just sort of start as acoustic songs and then we sort of build on top of them. So like 3 years ago he just asked me if we wanted to do this, and we've been kind of plugging away at this over the weekends and on evenings. We got two other songs we finished so far, and then there's about 6 or 7 that we have in the hopper that are hoping to be, we want to finish up sometime this year to finish a whole album. So anyway, again, this original demo was just something we did in a spare bedroom at his place 3 years ago. We just kind of got a feel for it, and he played it a little bit for me. We sort of zeroed in on a tempo, and I brought my laptop up there, and I had Logic up there, and I found a quick little drum pattern that he could play along with. So we had a tempo set, and he just recorded the song idea, which is just at this point it was just sort of two parts. There was like a main sort of verse part, and then a chorus, and you can hear him sort of he's got a melody in place too. So I'll play this all the way through.
Under the day, under the tone, under the phone, under the face, under the tone, under the phone, under the order, under the phone, under the things on the tone, all the
me go back into the verse part. So if you're familiar with the song, you'd notice right away that that chorus section is completely different from what we ended up with, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So that was what we started with. Again, it was mostly just recording to that beat so that we had the basic stuff in a framework and set to a sort of a tempo that we could start piecing together. So then what happened after that is, I should also mention that we live in two different cities. So I live in Chicago, and he lives in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is on the western side of the state. So it's about 5 hours away. I used to live in Wisconsin in La Crosse, and we used to be in a band together long ago. And so it's been great to sort of like, and we've been friends the whole time, but it's been great to sort of rekindle our musical collaboration. So again, like we've been doing a lot of this long distance sort of when I can get up there on a weekend every once in a while. So we've been putting the song away for a long time, and I've been playing with it in Chicago on my own a little bit. So that's exactly what happened here. I just took this original demo and then brought it back to my place in Chicago and just started goofing around with it, essentially just layering different instruments. I'm mostly a keyboard player, but I also play a bit of guitar and drums and such. And so I just started playing with some drum programming, some real basic stuff, and a little bit of guitars and some keyboards, and just trying to see what we could do in terms of the overall feel of the song and what we could maybe turn it into. And so this is what the first sort of arrangement sketch that I came up with, and then I sent it back to him to check it out. So I'll play a little bit of that too. So anyway, again, that was just a quick little snippet of just some, that's as far as I basically took it. I just wanted to get a basic feel for what the colors would be in the arrangement. Sent it back to him to get his feedback. And again, I feel like the song idea he came up with already had a lot of the stuff in place. It had these great chords, a great melody, and it had just an overall feel in that verse that sort of set the tone, the emotional tone for the song, sort of a real sort of bit of a melancholy feel. But also, of course, it has this very nice sort of 3 feel. It's it's 3/4. That's sort of what I ended up calling it. It could have been 6/8, but we settled on 3/4. Again, it's just it's a great sort of core idea. And one of the things that as we were kicking around the stuff, it just kind of kept on feeling like that B section, that chorus that's in there now, it just kind of felt out of place. I'll play it again real quick. That part, it's great in itself, but for some reason it felt like it was a different song. And although that can also be great, just to switch in sections, something about it in this case just felt a little off. And I guess as I was talking to him, I just asked if I could sort of experiment with some different chords and just try to keep the whole song in sort of the same emotional tone, and just kind of make the whole thing feel like it's not switching so greatly around in terms of emotions. So I went back and sort of took another stab at it, and basically, obviously, if you know the song or the final recording, you'll notice that some of the stuff that ended up in the final recording was right there from the beginning of this sort of color test, this arrangement sketch. Some of the electric guitars that I was playing with on that shot, on that time through, ended up liking a lot, and we just ended up keeping them because it was just sort of okay, that works great. And there's no reason to re-record it or redo it, so we just kept that stuff. And that's one of the great things about all of this new technology we have is you can sort of start building things brick by brick and redo stuff if you want to redo it, or you can keep stuff ultimately. Actually, as we take a look at the detailed mix later, you'll notice that scratch guitar from the very first recording is actually in the mix, the final mix. There's a little bit of that in there, but we'll see that later. So anyways, I'll play this I guess this is called Arrangement Sketch 3. I'm not sure what Arrangement Sketch 2 was, but this basically has some new chords that I was playing around with for the chorus. Again, just like after Casey and I were talking about it, just decided to try something different at that part. So we'll listen to this a bit. So that's the new chorus, and that's actually what we ended up with in terms of the chords for the chorus. And I'll talk about that real quickly. You'll also notice that the arrangement has changed a little bit. I added a little re-intro section, and then another verse. Again, just stitching things together, playing with the arrangement, just kind of trying to flesh things out even more in terms of how the overall song is going to fit together. And when I was playing with those chords in the chorus, the main thing I was thinking was to keep it fairly simple and to just to kind of lay out a nice bed of chords that Casey could come up with a melody on top of, because that's one of his great skills. He can actually come up with melodies on top of very, very intricate sort of guitar parts. But in this case, I just wanted to keep the chords very simple, kind of hang on chords for a long time. And just sort of basically, like I said, just provide sort of a bed that he could work with, and also keeping it in that sort of that melancholy mood. So anyway, so that was Arrangement Sketch 3 at that point, and then again, this is probably over the course of weeks or maybe a couple months. Who knows? I don't remember, but we were just kind of poking away at this every once in a while when we had free time, and then at some point I went up there to La Crosse again, and we decided we wanted to write a bridge, and we wanted to really flesh out the whole arrangement. So we got together and we wrote a bridge, just again keeping it fairly simple in terms of chords. Not really sure what the melody was going to do, but we cooked up a couple chords to make it work, and then we also came up with we decided how we were going to end it, which was just, okay, honestly, to a certain extent, it was kind of a cop-out, because as we were doing it, we couldn't really come up with a solid ending, so we were like, well, let's just have it fade out. And we decided to do the main pattern as a fade-out. And let me just quickly show you real quick a sketch. Let's see, I'll call this up. Where's preview? There we go. So here is basically a block chart of the song, the arrangement that we ended up with, pretty much after that songwriting session in La Crosse. So each block represents a measure, and so you can sort of see the basic layout of the song. It's a nice way of sort of visualizing the song. And one thing that I've learned as I've sort of blocked out different songs, like cover songs and such, is that it's always interesting to see, when you have these sort of stranded single measures. Sometimes, like just sort of the anomalies of the visual layout. If there's something that's not perfectly symmetrical, sometimes that means the song is in a way more interesting. These sort of times when something is sort of cut down by a measure, or like maybe the second verse is a little bit shorter. For instance, like in this case, the ending is something where we purposely were sort of like just essentially just coming up with sort of a mathematical idea to make it interesting throughout. So the outro basically is this repeating sort of pattern that goes through 3 times, and each time we play through it, I'll bring up the mix again here, and we'll just play the ending. This is the actual final mix, the way it ended up. You'll see that we had basically cycle through these 3 versions of the outro, and each time we sort of add one measure to it. And what it does, it still feels like it flows nicely, but there's a sort of kind of unpredictability about it that is nice. So it feels a little bit random at times, without not so much random, but just kind of surprising at times, while still flowing in a nice way. So let's try this.
We've lost you again.
So I'll back this up a little bit. Even further. Let's see. So this is picking up at the end of the second chorus. Here we go. So you get the idea. It's basically just, again, like cycling through these 3 versions of the outro that are each just sort of one measure different, and they each end on different chords. So it gives the ending a nice sort of variation, while still sort of all flowing together. And again, when we were writing this, we had no idea exactly what it was going to do on top of that. We just knew that we were probably going to throw some sort of vocal thing on top of it, but we just liked the sound of it as we were playing it with the acoustic guitar. So again, Casey just kind of recorded acoustic guitars during that session, and we got the whole song laid out with some basic drum programming and acoustic guitars and a little bit of bass samples. So yeah, so that's the chart that we ended up with, and this is the way the song ended up at the end. So I'll close that out. So just bring Logic back up. So let's see. Oh, so then the next part we did was we had that, we had the song basically in place, the framework of the song in place. And I think I just added a little bit of bass samples to it and some drums and stuff, some drum programming. But what we wanted to do was have live drums on it. And we know a couple great live drummers who are playing with us. The one that I know in Chicago here is, his name is Dan Reinhold. And so I brought him into a studio for a day in Chicago at a place called Strobe Studios. And here, I'll just play a little, I think I've got somewhere, little snippet of the setup here. Just, that's Dan at his kit. And this is actually him playing a different song that we recorded that day. But so anyways, we set up the drums in the studio, and honestly, in that song, he had the snares off, but, and I just kind of sat out in the studio and just sort of helped guide him on some of the songs, and we ended up doing about 3 or 4 takes, typically about 3 takes for each song, and knowing that I could edit it together later on. So, anyways, that's just a little snippet and picture of Dan recording the drums in the studio. Um, so then we basically had the main parts, and then at that point we had the basic framework. We had some live drums, a bunch of takes, and then we had a lot of work to do still. So at that point, I ended up going back up to La Crosse sometime in August of last year, I think. So about 6 months ago, maybe not quite that long ago, but a while ago. And we, Casey and I, basically would get together every night. I would work remotely during the day, and then we'd get together every evening and work on these 3 songs that we had started back then. And we would write lyrics and we would record lyrics. And the basic process was we would basically just set him loose. He had some melody ideas in place for most of these, and so we'd sort of set him loose on the songs that we had so far, the recordings as far as we had them, and we would just sort of listen to whatever sort of nonsense syllables he came up with and sort of pick out words. And also at this time we were sort of we were talking about just our lives in general, and what was going on, and that stuff started to infuse lyrically what the directions we were going. Um, which is that happens all the time. I mean, it's a nice way of, like, if you're just kind of talking about life, and then you start like writing lyrics together. It just those discussions can't help but inform what you end up lyrically, where you end up lyrically. So anyhow, I'm gonna play a snippet. We made this goofy little video that we posted around that time. It just it sort of shows you the setup that we had. Very raw. That's just me sitting there at his dining room table. We got the Apollo interface hooked up to a Shure SM7, and just wide open in his apartment at that point. And it really was like, I don't know, this SM7 is a great mic because it has a fairly tight pickup pattern, so it's not going to pick up a lot of extra stuff in the room. So we didn't have to worry about a whole ton of soundproofing. So it's very sort of guerrilla style recording, which we do a lot. We just sort of record wherever we're at and however we can get it. So I'll just play a little snippet of this. And what I think that video shows, I mean, obviously we're just playing with the video itself and just kind of making it a little bit goofy, but what it does show is this is pretty much the way we worked for about a week. We each had a pad of paper. He would step up to the mic and do some stuff. We'd talk about what was done. We'd kick back for half an hour or something and just start writing lyrics and throw lyric lines back and forth. And we would eventually, I mean, eventually it's kind of zero in on what the a theme for the song is and what the tone is. And this song eventually started taking shape, and we sort of landed on this idea of something sort of, it felt like nautical. I mean, something about it, the music itself just feels like it has some kind of, like, I don't know, a bit of wavy sort of sense to it. Maybe it's like the 3/4, the sort of 3 time, but it has sort of a sense of kind of waves. And we're both also big fans of, like, I don't know, like Echo and the Bunnymen and such. And there's a lot of sort of, sea, and there's romantic notions about the sea and the ocean, and it ties in very well with discussions of relationships and such, which this song also addresses to a certain extent in a very, very sort of abstract form. But that sort of ended up being the direction we started going lyrically, was kind of just talking about relationships in terms of sort of set at sea. And again, like, we weren't trying to be super literal with all the lyrics. It was very much, we both like lyrics that make sense to a certain extent, but also leave a lot of questions perhaps, and don't always have to be like a direct story or something. So it's mostly about the mood that the lyrics create. And so we worked really hard to kind of like get a tone out of the lyrics that sort of matched the tone, that's kind of melancholy tone that we had identified in the music earlier. So that was what we did that week, and he recorded all the vocals at that point, and then at that point it was just I took it back to Chicago, and it was my job to start working on the mix. So we'll start taking a look at that now. So here's the project in Logic, and here's all the tracks. I'll collapse these real quick here so you can see a little bit better what we've got. So basically, to break it down into these sort of subgroups, it's pretty standard, but we've got we have drums, live drums, and then a drum loop that was added in there, and that actually I'll talk about that in a little bit. But that started to show started to show up actually way back in the first arrangement sketch. So ended up liking it, and we ended up keeping it. There's bass, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, keyboards, and strings and vocals. So now I'm going to switch over and start talking a little more, a few more details about just this mix and what all the pieces that make up the actual song. So let's see where to start. Okay, the first thing I'll do is start at the top here. I don't do a ton of mixing these days, honestly. Like most of what I do is composition and sort of writing for interactive media stuff. So I haven't done a lot of really heavy mixing in the last few years. So I prefer to actually use models when I'm mixing and references basically. And I know there are a lot of engineers out there who don't. They do it enough and they are comfortable enough with their systems and everything that they just kind of got the sound that they've got, and they don't really want to sort of use other mixes to kind of identify that. Oops, there's a cat meowing in the background there. Anyway, but I like to use references, and I like to sort of occasionally. Number one, it's just a nice way to take a break and just sort of listen to some other music that I like, and but it's also it helps me identify, certain things like, frequency response or just sort of relative volumes. Because if it's a song that I like a lot, then I know that there may be something they're doing in that mix that I should keep in mind. So I had two songs basically that I was kind of using as references in this, and one of them is a Crowded House song called "Carry Carry."
I was standing on a wave.
So I'm not going to play the whole song, obviously, but it has sort of like, to me, it had sort of a similar tone, had a real sort of melancholy, a bit of a sadness to it that I loved. And also, I've always loved the mix on this. There's a nice, really heavy bass to it. And they're also, it's mixed by Bob Clearmountain, who's just a master. And he's not afraid to use effects in really creative and interesting ways. And so I always find that to be inspiring. So that was one of the models. And the other model was Jeff Buckley, Last Goodbye. And the main thing that I was using this for was mostly just listening to the string sections later in the song. Like, let's see here.
Kiss me, please kiss me. Kiss me out of desire, baby, no consolation.
Anyways, it's a great song. It's one of my favorite songs ever, and also a great mix by Andy Wallace. So some of the sonic things in this also informed the mix when I was working on it. Just again, like just occasionally just kind of flipping back to these songs, I would just sort of remind myself, oh, okay, maybe that kick needs to be a little more powerful here or there. Anyways, things like that. But also the thing that I got from this was I knew that once we decided we wanted to put some strings in the chorus, I've always loved the string parts that he wrote for the Grace album, And so I just want to listen to him a little bit and just kind of get inspired. And I don't think that I really achieved what he achieved with these, honestly. But the one thing that I took away from this was there's a real nice sense of melody and focus to it. It's not so much a huge string section all the time. It's more of there's a real sort of defined kind of higher melody. So that I tried to bring a little bit of that into the strings that we wrote for this. Again, it's hard to top Jeff Buckley. So, anyways, and again, I feel like it's always good to have music that you absolutely love to be your goal. Like shoot for music and shoot to make music that you really, really admire. Even if when if you turn back to Jeff Buckley's mix and Bob Clearmountain's mix, you're just like, oh, I'm not quite achieving that yet. It's like I just figured might as well keep on shooting for that kind of stuff and be aiming for it, rather than simply just settling for something that you can currently achieve and not trying to push yourself. So anyway, enough of that soapbox. Let's see. I'll move on to the actual content here. And let's see. So here's the drums. We'll just kind of look at each of these subgroups. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but a couple interesting things about each of these that for those of you who are under recording. So I do a lot of sample supplementing. Actually, I do a lot of sample replacement. I ended up keeping mostly... I'll solo up the drums here. Listen to it once it kicks in here eventually. So the kick is completely replaced. Ended up with two samples. There's a kick body. Just got a little more low end. And there's this kick attack. Just a real high ticky thing, but you wouldn't think you'd notice it, but if you take it away and put it back in, it's definitely really noticeable. So then there's the live snare, and that's gated and compressed a bit to get a little more snap. And then in terms of snare, there's also two other snares. There's two other samples that I used. One is this sort of tight sample, just to kind of give a little bit of stereo wideness to the sound, and a little bit of like snare buzziness to it. And then there's this other sample, which is all just sort of like a powery sort of verb right in the center. So it's just that real sort of big kind of powery sort of room verb. And I just want to look at these both. On both of these, I'm using so there's obviously compression going on. Here, let me stop this so that we're not annoyed by that. But I'm also using this transient designer. Oops, there's all my plugins. Bunch of stuff going on. Let's close some of this stuff out. There's this transient master. I think this is by Native Instruments. And you notice that I'm actually a lot of people are always trying to get the attack into the snare. And I kind of felt like there was plenty of attack in the live snare. So I was just looking for more of a filling out the body of it. So if we listen to this soloed up, it's just really I'm taking down the attack and bringing up the sustain of the sound. So it just feels, it's definitely not, there's not much attack to that at all. It's just kind of filling in the sound. And then when you add in the live snare to it, they kind of work together. Same thing with the sample here of the so that sort of power reverb sample. That's a UAD EMT 250 plugin. UAD stuff is fantastic. I love all of their plugins. So it's just set up that way, and then I think that I ended up throwing this into mono because I just wanted to be like right dead center with the snare. So that's just that. What else? Toms are also end up using samples on toms, like replacing those. And a lot of samples that I use these days, just wanted them to be wanted to have them like be nice and very full of body. And also, again, I think I cut down on the attack on those also because I just didn't want them to be too sharp. I was more interested in the sort of the low end boost of those moments. Um, yeah, so I mean that's all I'm going to talk about with the drums right now. Obviously, there's like some edits going on when I comped together the different takes, but a lot of it's coming from I think take three it looks like. Um, and for the most part, just kind of like doing a few little tweaks here and there, like in the chorus, just to kind of because the part changed slightly after we recorded the drums, and then adding in some cymbal samples also. I'm going to make a plug for a sample company. It's called That Sound, THAT, That Sound, and they make great drum samples, full of character, a lot of really interesting stuff they're doing, and they're very reasonably priced. So if you're into samples, I definitely would check it out. I may even throw the link to it down in the description. I love their samples. So then we also have this drum loop thing I talked about before. This is basically something that ended up sticking around from the very beginning, and it sounds really weird, but play it once. So that was just sort of a beat that I happened to be playing with at the time that we were first working on this song, and I just sort of randomly threw it into this song and just tried it out, and I loved it. I just was like, okay, it does this weird thing where it pushes, kind of has this sort of like push and pull effect on the drums and the rhythm, because it doesn't really flow very well. It's very stiff, but along with the live drums, it has this kind of like weird sort of sense of playing off of it, and I don't know, it's kind of. It's weird because like the drums and this whole song has a bit of a swing feel to it, and that drum loop is very straight, and sort of like when you mash the two together, there's something about it that I just liked a lot. I guess I'm not going to try to like identify anymore what it is, but I just liked it. And one other thing I'll mention about this drum loop is once we put it in here and I was using it in the mix, I threw it through through Space Designer, and ended up getting this kind of. You'll notice that it has a bit of a sort of a phasey effect, where essentially it's not very focused in terms of its placement in the mix. It's just kind of all over, and it's a nice sort of. Here, I'll play it again here. So it sort of sits in a different sort of sonic landscape than the live drums, which I always like that. I like, when, again, that's maybe a bit of the whole like Bob Clearmountain stuff and other great mixers, but there's just always trying to like put things in the mix into different spots. And so that was one example of that. And again, like I ended up, all these grayed out regions are places where we end up taking it out because we didn't want it throughout the whole thing. It just felt nice in the verses and the ending. So that's pretty much where we had it. So let's move on down to the bass. So the bass is completely fake. It's all a sample. And all of the stuff, like all the virtual keyboards and virtual strings and virtual bass, I do it all in MIDI, and then I end up printing the audio track because I prefer to work with audio. You can mess with it a little easier, and I also just like the fact that once I've got it printed to audio, I just use the bounce in place function in Logic. Then essentially I know that it is exactly what it is, and it's not going to like goof up at all. Like sometimes when you're using MIDI, if you're running a lot of instruments at one time, sometimes for various technical reasons, a note might trigger a little late or something, or just get triggered strangely or get cut off. It happens rarely, but you just don't want that to be happening as you're playing around in the mix, going back and forth. So I always print my MIDI tracks. And I'll take a quick look at this. Here's how it sounds. It's going to sound kind of strange. I'll solo it up by itself. Let's see. Oop, that's the low, and there's the high. So that's the whole bass part together. So you notice that what I did, I ended up copying the bass part to the second track, and essentially just on this track, the bass guitar low, I just threw a high cut filter on it, or a low pass filter on it, whatever, however you want to call it, and just cut out all the highs, a bunch of highs. And then on this track, I did the opposite. I just cut out all the lows. And the reason I did that was it was twofold, two things that got me. First of all, on the high guitar part, I just ended up throwing this Roland Dimension D plugin from UAD, which I don't think is available anymore, unfortunately. I think that there was some kind of licensing issue, but it's one of my favorite chorus plugins because it's very sort of, it doesn't do a lot of moving around or weird sort of pitch things. It just sort of gives a nice fullness to things. So I ended up throwing that on just the high end of the bass, just to kind of give it a little bit of a little more width. And then in the low end of the bass, that's just very sort of straight ahead. But the one thing that is a little different about this is there's a compressor at the very end of this that is set up to be triggered via a side chain from where does it go? From the kick sample body, which basically is the low end part of the kick drum. So basically, what I wanted to have happen here is whenever the kick drum hits, which has got a lot of low frequency information in it, I want it to duck down and compress the level of the low end of the bass guitar, so that you essentially make a little bit of room in the low end every time that kick drum hits. So instead of stacking a bunch of low end on top of low end, you're sort of, again, clearing out a little bit of space in the bass guitar for the kick drum to shoot through. So that's just one example of using a side chain to like sort of trigger the compressor. Oops, that I should not have set that to none. Let's go back to Audio 18. Cool. Anyways, there's plenty of tutorials about side chaining on the internet, so if you want to learn more about that, just do a quick search. It's a very handy trick. The other thing I'll say about the bass, let me unhide the tracks here. So I'm going to go down to all the original MIDI tracks, and I use Trillion is the samples that I use. I love Trillion. It's a fantastic bass virtual instrument by Spectrasonics. But one thing I'll point out is that I played the bass pretty much live to begin with, and then went back through and sort of tweaked it a bit. And one thing that you'll notice is, and that I did purposely, was there's all these sort of like sort of swung notes at the end right before you jump into the next main notes. Let's listen to this real quick. So you'll notice that those little like do 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 those little pickup kind of notes. I originally didn't play them that hard, but that's sort of what provides a bit of the bounce to the song. That little like ba-doo, ba, ba-doo, ba, ba-doo. So I went through and basically, if I switch this over to the velocity tool, you can go in here and just change the velocity to whatever you want. And so I typically would raise those up a bit. Like I said, this one was at, I think, 117 we started out at. And so you'll notice that most all of those, like the green and yellow, are sort of lighter velocities or just medium velocities, whereas the orange stuff are a little higher velocities. And you'll notice that most of those little pickup swung notes are kind of kicked up to sort of accentuate the bounce of the bass part. So that's just a little note about MIDI programming. Let's see. So that's bass. So let's hide all of our MIDI tracks again and go back to our stuff. So that was bass. All good. Acoustic guitars. Let's solo that up. We've got something soloed here. So our acoustic guitars, we basically have, again, like I said, I kept the scratch guitar from the very original recording that we did in the first verse. I kind of liked, it has sort of a real, lo-fi sort of sound that I kind of liked. just real raw. Whoop. Whoop. Let's see. It just sounds sort of raw, and there's a bit of, not a lot of brightness to it all. It's just sort of a bit of body to it. Um, and I also like the idea of having, a couple of different guitars strumming at the same time, because you get a little bit of they're not always playing the same thing, so it sounds a little bit thicker. So we did record stereo acoustic guitars, and we also recorded a stereo high strung guitar, which is basically, if you listen to it here, is just so it's just, all it is a guitar that has, it's sometimes called Nashville tuning, I think, or I don't know, Nashville string, but also I just call it high strung. It's basically all the high strings of a 12 string on a 6-string guitar. So it gives a real nice bright sound. And then when you couple that with the 6-string guitar, it has a nice sort of nice thick sound. You'll also notice that on this high-strung guitar, I threw an Altiverb reverb, just to kind of put it in a bit of a, it looks like I put it in a bathroom there, just to kind of give it a little more space and just kind of not make it quite so in your face. Again, I like doing that. I also, one thing you'll notice throughout this whole thing is I tend to not use a lot of effects sends. I like to just throw effects actually on in the inserts, which is not a very efficient way to do it. But fortunately, like with the UAD processing boost, and I have a pretty reasonable system, I'm actually able to handle that kind of stuff without overloading. And for some reason, I just like to have that sort of control over the individual tracks. So you'll see that actually I do that in the vocals too. But again, it's not that I'm opposed to using effects sends, but I just sort of like to use inserted effects a lot of times, or else double up tracks and have one track be the effect and one be the dry sound. Easier to automate, easier to see as you're working with it. The other thing I will just point out here quickly is, not much else to say about the acoustic guitars. Casey played great all the way through, and there's this bridge section that was played. Oh, one thing I'll mention about all of this is you'll notice again that there are certain regions that are grayed out because I took them out, and it's just because he played guitar all the way through the whole song on all of it. And as you're building up the arrangement, it's, I think, one of the biggest things that I was able to do before I actually got into like the meat of mixing was cleaning up the arrangement and just trying to like make room for things to poke through and be focused on. So having just the left guitar, the bright guitar on the left hand side, it was perfectly fine just having that one guitar over there. And then also in the middle section here, in the bridge, at one point we did have, the guitar going all the way through. So he played the acoustic guitar all the way through that whole section. And as I was working with it, something about that section, I just really liked the way the electric guitars were working, and kind of felt like the electric guitars would have more power and just more focus again if there was a little more space there sonically in the mix. So I'll just play through that real quick, and you can listen to that section.
When all of the pleasant reminders are thrown overboard, will be forgotten in no time. We will remember ourselves.
So the bass guitar really supplies, all the information you need in terms of like what the chords are there, and the guitar part, the little strummed guitar parts. To me, those kind of were, I don't know, just they kind of gave that bridge the lift that it needed sonically and just sort of arrangement wise, versus just having acoustic guitars continuing all the way through it. So it was just, again, like one of those decisions you make as you're mixing where you maybe have all this material that you've recorded and played with, but at some point you start thinning things out just to, again, draw focus to certain parts, and also just to make the overall track just feel more dynamic. Anyways, okay, so that's acoustic guitars. So electric guitars, ended up being a lot of stuff going on with those. Let's break those open. So there's this opening swell, which I think I just was running some effect. I just played a chord and was running an effect through Guitar Rig at some point, and it had this sort of really interesting sort of sound. And I was like, okay, that's cool, and just kept it. So we'll just play that real quick. And I don't know, for some reason, it just kind of felt like that'd be a nice way to open the song. And one thing to notice here, there's actually, I copied this twice. There's this dry version of it that comes in, which was the original thing that I recorded. But then I decided to have a second track, and this time insert this spread effect on it, which basically just kind of messes with phase again and puts it in sort of a different sonic space. Again, similar to where I was doing with the drum loop beat. So let's listen to this real quick. And so what you end up getting is this sense of like, I don't know, a slight sense of movement. So it starts off sort of in this weird sort of, nebulous kind of location, and gets then a little more focused as the second part comes in. It's a subtle thing, but I don't know. Those are the kind of details that I think ultimately, if you're paying attention to that kind of stuff throughout the whole mix, it's the stuff that makes it really fun to listen to a mix, over and over again, because you're always picking up these little things that you didn't hear before. So hopefully, it works fine if you're just listening to it over speakers, but then if you listen to it on headphones, you're like, oh wow, that's an interesting detail that I never picked up on before. So again, those kinds of things that's always the stuff that I look to add at this end stage, and even as we're going throughout, like, what can we add to this? So then there's this tremolo guitar, just kind of strumming the chords. And again, this is another case where I just decided I wanted some verb on it. I wanted to have a sense of it sort of moving across the spectrum. So I basically copied that track and inserted a couple different reverbs. Actually, just sort of this Native Instruments copy of the old Lexicon. Oh gosh, what's the name? The name escapes me now, but it's basically the blah, 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 24. It's I can't believe I can't think of it now. But anyways, it's classic reverb unit. And for some reason, I just decided that I wanted to throw an altoverb, like an altoverb copy of the AMS RMX 16 on it, just to kind of give it even more sense of space. So that's this track soloed up. Let's see, play that. And then again, like rolling off a lot of the low end on that thing. Notice if we actually would look at a lot of these tracks, there's a lot of tracks that have low end rolled off because you just don't need all of it there. But by panning that to the right, you get a nice sort of sense of movement. So that's the tremolo guitar. And then there are these sort of what I just called the melody guitars. And that's sort of like the main, like kind of like wandering the sort of wandering lines that happen during the opening and the reintro and then the chorus again. So it's just this kind of stuff. And there's sort of this just being like,
I want you to send her to find it, carry us home.
so that's that guitar line. Let's see what else. Oh, there's some harmonics again. Like once you get to like approaching the final mix and sort of listening to the song over and over, I was just like listening to it and trying to think of like, okay, what is it missing? What parts of this song are feeling like they could use a little more distinction or something interesting to kind of grab my ear. And something about the second verse. One thing we did there is we stripped it back to just acoustic guitars, but then listening to it, it just kind of was like playing with an electric guitar, and I just started playing these harmonics, and I thought it was really nice. It's like just these.
More a tragedy, swim to the shore. Are these?
So it's just that part. This.
Am I in a dream or a tragedy? Swim.
So again, just like a huge reverb on these things hitting the harmonics. And one thing to note about that too is like to get the notes that I wanted to play there, I actually had to like tune like one or two of the strings to different notes, because you can only get the harmonics on the octave, at least the ones that I was trying to get at. And so basically just had to like do a little bit of messing with the actual guitar, and that kind of stuff in the studio, it's all fair game. So then the bridge guitar, there's this sort of these little accents. So I'll play that in context real quick. So it's just those little hits. And again, like I was looking for something at that point to kind of lift that bridge above just the chord changes, and trying to give it something a little more oomph. So there are a couple things going on there. There's a couple things in the keyboards we'll look at in a second. And then there's also this little reverse guitar part. I just grabbed one section of that bridge guitar, and it has a nice sense of anticipation leading into the bridge, and then we use it again a couple times within the bridge. Oh, and I haven't really talked about automation at all. There's a ton of automation throughout this whole thing, but one of the automation bits in this is just, there's a slight bit of movement on the panning of that reverse thing as it goes when it first comes in. So again, just it's a detail that might get lost perhaps, but those are the kind of details that I think ultimately make for a really interesting mix. You don't have to have those to have an interesting mix. It should just be a good song that's clear. But I tend to gravitate towards stuff that is a great song, sounds great, and also has lots of interesting sort of colorful bits in it. So anyways, those harmonics recur at the ending. I just basically kind of copied those same things and placed them throughout where it sounded cool. Just kind of dropping them in and experimenting, and then bounced them to their own track. Let's see. And also you'll notice there are 4 tracks of harmonics at the end. I think I did a couple different extra notes here, but just kind of getting thick. And then there's also this weird little, this is an interesting example. At the end of the bridge here, there's these just kind of nasty guitars, and they just sound like crap actually. And I just was again like listening to the bridge and playing around with it, and just sort of decided to like, okay, I'm just gonna like play something random and strange, and um, it's basically just two guitar parts. I think there's one guitar part that just sort of has this kind of ascending line, the melodic line, and that just gets doubled up. And then there's another guitar part that is just two guitars kind of playing a single note. And just kind of, I was just sort of bending it, you know, like crazy as I was playing it. Again, just to kind of add a little bit of chaos to that moment. And ultimately, you'll see when we go to the strings part, I ended up like basically duplicating that part in the strings, so it all was kind of working together. But again, it's an example of sort of just playing around with it, just throwing it on, and just sort of like, there's nobody watching, nobody is waiting for anything, so it's like just play with it, let some chaos happen, and some good stuff might come out. It always does. I mean, like a lot of the stuff in the song is sort of like a random idea, futzing with something, and then there you go. It works, and I like it, and Casey likes it, and we keep it. So, all right. So those are the electric guitars. Close that group up and move down to the keyboards. So there's not a ton of keyboards in this, but there is one little keyboard part that came up with at the very beginning that kind of plays along with the main melody. So let's see once.
Am I in a dream? Is all what it seems.
Can't really hear very well there. Let's see.
Into the shore, a memory fades. I want you to say.
You can actually, the part is also, it recurs in the ending. So I'll play it there because you can hear the part a little better in the mix. And I'll solo it up. It's over in the right speaker, mostly.
Lost you again. Never to be found.
So it's this little like bouncy kind of do. And it's actually some really almost like awful sounding keyboards is what it is. Purposely. It's actually it's a great plugin called Omnisphere, one of my favorite synth plugins, and it's got a lot of these great organic sounds too. And that's just like an old thrift organ sample and kind of a broken Rhodes sample kind of playing together. And again, like I like the idea of not everything having to be pretty and beautiful, just sort of like get some nasty, weird, broken sounds in there. I mean, again, I use all virtual instruments still to begin with, but I mean, you could even take it a step further and actually find weird, broken instruments. I just use virtual instruments for convenience mostly, but I would love to have 5 million broken, weird instruments laying around that I could sample. So that's that keyboard part. That's again, like that's another example of played it all the way through and realized that it was just kind of getting in the way. So took it out a lot. Like you can only see it's kind of making little bitty appearances here and there in the first and second verse, and then it comes back at the very end for the fade out. So what else do we have? Okay, here's another in the bridge. There's this. I was just kind of playing around with the Alchemy synth that comes with Logic, and it's again another fantastic synth. And I just kind of like looking through some random patches, and I struck this 12-string patch that on one half the keyboard had actual sort of like picking sounds, and on the other part had actual strum samples. So I just played that, and let's see once. and that's actually how the song just came out. We lucked out that the one note that I played, the whatever that, I can't remember what the chord is exactly at that point. I think it's an F sharp. It just happens to be an F sharp major as opposed to an F sharp minor, and it just worked with the chords that we were actually using. But it has this nice sort of like bright sort of sort of a mid range. Oh, excuse me, boy. Sorry, I'm gonna take a sip of water. Too much chattering. Has a nice sort of mid-rangey, almost sitar-y kind of sound to it. And then there's also in Omnisphere, there's a sound that I like a lot. There's this cedar piano, and it has a great sort of like almost like a tack piano sound to it. And I basically just doubled up what was going on in the electric guitars at that point. So like this bridge guitar section, I'll solo that up, and you can hear those kind of working together. So it gives a little brightness to the left speaker there. So again, just these little sparkly bits to kind of like add a little bit of high frequency stuff to that. And speaking of high frequency stuff, there's the last bit of keyboard that I added was I don't know, I kind of felt as I was going through, like it might be nice to have something sort of a little more paddy and kind of wavy sounding. So I stumbled on this other Alchemy patch. I don't remember what the patch is. I've got it written down somewhere, but it's this really sort of bright kind of nice sort of angelic-y sort of sound. So that, in the context, you just kind of couple that with the harmonics at that point.
Am I in a dream or a tragedy? Swim to the shore. Are these end of days when all...
So just a touch in there in the mix, just to kind of give it a little bit more magic, so it's fun. And again, you'll notice if you look at the channel over here, the EQ is, got tons of low cut out of it, and the highs are boosted there. And then at the end of the song, I think I have another track of that, where it's sort of, they're both sort of trading off at the end. So there's one track that's doing, it's kind of like the high part, and then there's another track that's kind of playing some lower notes. And again, I'm using this sort of a different sort of phase manipulation to kind of put it off to the left and sort of, but outside of the usual spectrum of the speakers. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology, but just it messes with the phase to kind of put it in its own territory. So if you listen to this together, so there's the high part coming in, and then pretty soon we'll have the low part. So we're just kind of trading off back and forth between. So here comes the low part again.
We've lost you again. Never, ever to...
So again, it's kind of getting this nice sort of, I don't know, just adds a little bit of sort of mysticalness to the ending. And then also one thing I'll mention about this part is I think I'm playing like a E. Maybe like an E fifth triad, or not triad, but just a E and a B together. So just get that E root and a fifth in that low part. And then I think that I just, on this one hit, I lowered it down to a B flat for a second, just to get a little bit of a weird sort of dissonance out of it. You'll notice that here. Then it kind of resolves up, and in context, it gives this nice sort of. Here, listen to it again. So we're already in the midst of the fade out at that point. And again, it just sort of gives it a weird sort of, I don't know, I just hitting dissonant and weird and odd notes that are not quite expected, I think are It's like, again, it's just like any of the other sort of sonic sort of surprises you might build into it, but you just add a little bit of harmonic surprise or something different that would just kind of, to some people they might listen to that and think that it sounds off or just sort of, you know, like out of key. But you know, I mean, I guess I'm just used to listening to stuff like that all the time, and I think ultimately most people kind of listen to that and just kind of feel like it just adds a little point of interest. If they even notice it, probably don't. So then there's the strings. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, and I've been rambling on for a long time here. So there's string parts. That's pretty much all I'll say about that. I just used a really cool string plugin, like a virtual instrument called the plugin is I don't think I've got it easily available here. I can open stuff up, but it's just East-West Hollywood strings. And I honestly am I'm pretty much a novice at it right now. I will need to explore it a lot more and get better at it. But you can do some pretty amazing things with it. And I'm just scratching the surface. So that's all I'll say about strings. But just the strings are just kind of a nice touch, just to kind of have something. Again, like the song to me feels slightly romantic. It's a bit melancholy, romantic, sad, all these different words you want to throw at it, and strings add a nice little lift to the chorus. So finally, the vocals. The most important thing, leaving them way till last. A lot of vocals on this. Although for the most part we kind of kept it focused on just a couple of them. But got Casey's lead vocal here.
Am I in a dream?
So just that single dry lead vocal.
Is all what it seems, or a tragedy swim to the shore?
And then
a memory fades. I want you to send her to find it and carry.
Oh yeah, this is an example here. You heard that little cutout, or kind of like swim got cut out.
Or a tragedy swim to the shore.
That's just an example of there's a bit of a low end bump there, and instead of like taking it out to another audio editor, I just dropped this little bit. I'll zoom in here. This little beginning bit of that word onto a second track, and just did a severe cut on the low end, so when it all plays back, it's. Let's see what's.
Or a tragedy swim to the shore.
Goes by without the low end. There used to be sort of like a little low end puff or something there that was not fun to listen to. So the other thing you'll notice, obviously, is that there's a lot of effects on this. I really enjoy. I mean, I don't use it all often, but every once in a while, it's fun to like play with a really super long delay. So this one's got like.
Am I in a dream? Is all what it seems, or a tragedy?
So there's also a couple different things going on here. There's a short verb that is just sort of providing a bit of almost like roomy sort of thickness.
Am I in a dream?
So there's that, and then there's also a second take of vocals that we kept that we liked that is running through. Let's see, where is that? Yep, it's running through this UAD MXR flanger plugin, just to kind of give it a very sort of flangey doubling sound.
Am I in a dream? Is all what it seems, or
So you combine all those, and it has this sort of real thick sound to it.
Am I in a dream? Is all what it seems, or a tragedy swim to the shore?
So again, it's got a lot of thickness to it, but there's still that lead vocal is definitely the most prominent, that first one. So there's still a bit of a focus on the main vocal, but I've always liked thick vocals. I love the Ghost and Machine by the Police. That whole album is just awesome, and you can just hear the stacked vocals. I mean, there's harmonies, but there's also just stacked main vocals to kind of give it this real interesting sense of thickness. This lead vocal long delay thing. One thing to notice about this is I'm doing the same sort of trick that I did before with the bass, where I basically use a side chain compressor, and this time it's being triggered by, let's see, where is it? Yep, the lead vocal. Whoa, my mouse went a little crazy there. So this lead vocal track is basically what's controlling this compressor, and it's set up so that if we solo it, and I think that it should still work, but I think it'll still react appropriately. You can basically hear it pushing down the level of the delay whenever the actual lead vocal is active, so that this delay doesn't sort of get in the way of the lead vocal until the lead vocal is done, and then it kicks back up and you can hear it more prominently. So let's just listen to this delay track. So you can see it, like it's kicking down like 5 to 6 dB whenever the vocal is kicking in, and then jumping back up. So it's basically kind of poking through whenever the vocal is done. So let's see, there's that, and that kind of carries out throughout. And then in the chorus, we decided to add some harmonies. Actually, what's funny is we ended up, we recorded those vocals back in August, started the, cleanup process, and then just before I was ready to mix, realized that there were a couple of lyric lines that we wanted to change, and actually a little melody line. We actually listened back to the original demo, and there's this sense. Here, let's listen to the vocal real quick here.
Am I in a dream? Is all what it seems, or a tragedy into the shore?
So there's that melody, and that sort of direction of the melody was always there. And then you'll notice in the second part of the melody, he kind of goes up for a second on, I can't remember what the line is right now, but you'll hear it.
A memory fades. I want you to send her to find it.
So that part, I want you to, he goes up on the send her to find it. That part used to go down like the first part of the melody, and so both those melodies pretty much sounded the same. And we happened to listen to the old original demo, and that was what he was singing pretty much all the time in that original demo. And we're like, oh boy, that actually is really cool. And so we ended up going back, and I drove back up to La Crosse, and we ended up recording a couple different lines like that, just to kind of shake up the melody a little bit. And also at that time, we ended up recording some high background harmonies on the vocals. So these really high sort of like falsetto notes.
I'm not sure if I'll follow, waters become shallow, it's so far to fall.
And I've got, like, if you'll notice, these are really tons of low cut on them, so it just sounds almost like radio voice almost. But again, that's just for the purpose of fitting into the mix, so that you end up with just kind of adding, I mean, you can definitely pick them out, but it's just, they're not sort of like super prominent. It's not like a second vocal. It's just like thickening.
I'm not sure if I'll follow, waters become shallow, it's so far to fall. It just doesn't.
So again, it's just kind of like adding a little bit of thickness to that line, and then one other line in the second part. And the other thing in the vocals is just this, we got this whole background vocal bit, which is just these so in that, in context of the whole thing, this is how it sounds at that point in the bridge.
We'll be forgotten in no time. We will remember ourselves.
So what's interesting about that is that the first night that we were recording up in the cross, or one of the first nights when we first were working on this, we were, again, we just were kind of like messing around with the melody and trying to figure out what we would be singing during this bridge, and we kind of came up with this melody that part in the backgrounds. But at that point, it was going to be the main melody. It was going to be like, okay, that's going to be what the melody is. But the next day when we came back to work on it, Casey had the idea like, well, why don't we keep that as sort of background vocals and then sing something else on top of it, and that'll be and that I can play around with. And again, that's just an example of number one, leaving a little bit of time to like sit on things and think about things, but also just kind of, like come up with a slightly different idea and just kind of going with it and trying it. And I'm really happy with the way this bridge turned out, and it's mostly because Casey wanted to have that other vocal kind of flying on top of the original melody line that we cooked up. So yeah, I think that's plenty of stuff to talk about and absorb, and probably too much, but hopefully, again, like one or two people out there in the world might be interested in this stuff. So I'll call that it and wish you well. All right. Again, feel free to visit that SoundCloud site. Hopefully we'll have more stuff up there eventually. And probably be diving back into the other songs and then hopefully releasing the full album later this year. It's going to go dark for a while, I guess, while we work on new songs. But there are 3 songs up there right now that you could listen to if you wanted to. And other than that, just keep on having fun making your own music. All right. Have a good night. Bye.